Welcome back to Student Hub Live, Faculty of Wellbeing Education and Language Studies Freshers event. This session is about becoming a professional, approaches and attributes. So for those of you right at the start of your OU journey, this is a key thing to bear in mind as you progress in your career. And for those of you who are already midway through, it might be something that you'd like to start focusing on and refining now. Now, we're going to introduce you to my guests in just a second, but before then, I just wanted to nip over to Kieran on the hot desk and see how everybody is doing and whether there are any questions we can help with. There's been so much chat today. Kieran, how's everyone at home?
Some students saying they haven't received their module materials yet. So speaking as an academic at the university, someone who is a tutor and also a staff tutor, just a couple of hints for those students. There has been an extension of the enrolment date for the Open University, so there might be some of the paper-based materials might arrive a little bit later, but for the vast majority of modules, you can still access those materials online. So if you go online and then go to the assessment and then resources tabs at the top of your student homepage, a number of things are in there that you'll receive through the post anyway. So it's a good starting point.
Absolutely. And if you are brand new, next week we have a Freshers event on the 28th of September. We'll be taking you through all the basics and showing you how your student homepage is absolutely essential. And as Kieran says, there are alternative resources for your study. So you can get a PDF version of your book, for example, if you have it there, and also take a look at the study planner. It's great to get ahead, but don't panic if not. We've still got a little bit of time before the official module start date. Any other questions we have, Kieran, right now?
No, it largely revolves around that, and there's obviously been a lot of interest too regarding the last discussion, which segues really nicely into Eric and Kerr's discussion about professionalism online, and you do mean so I think that's going to fit quite nicely into the next topic.
Brilliant. Well, let me introduce you to my guests. Eric Adaya has worked tirelessly on this programme and in fact many other programmes if you've been to our Student Hub Live events before. He's a senior lecturer in educational leadership and management with over 20 years experience in post-compulsory education. And he's also a chartered manager, chartered IT professional and an academic. And so he brings an interesting perspective to us in terms of becoming professional. And we also have Kerry Jones, who is following a career in the health and social care sector. So very different background here to Eric. Kerry entered academia to teach and research on health, wellbeing and social care related subjects, including person-centered approaches to working professionally with clients and patients. And Kerry is a lecturer in end-of-life care at the Open University. Welcome to you both. Now, there are certain guidelines. I mean, one of the reasons we wanted this session was there are codes of practice, guidelines, etc., that professionals are expected to abide by, and in fact that are laid down by organisations like the National Midwifery Council, for example. And one of these guidelines is that the applicants are required to provide evidence of good character. So, for example, compassion. So is there something then, Kerry, that you think that can be taught, or is it something innate, inherent within the person, this good character?
Yeah, I mean, the whole premise of this is that students are expected to kind of show that they can professionally engage in the kind of practice without sort of being under supervision. And so to evidence this, they have to try and demonstrate that they have certain characteristics such as honesty, integrity, responsibility, and one of those being compassion, particularly in the health and social care sector, and just thinking about end-of-life care, certainly. As to whether it can be taught, it's something inherent. I'm very much reminded of the fact in sort of working in my own profession and sort of conducting research that a lot of the time when I made observations that we can see that professionals either have that a very natural ability to show compassion, or other people aren't necessarily. And one of the things that we aim to do with or to demonstrate with students, certainly through the modules and as they develop, is the kind of need to have this compassion. But how we demonstrate that can happen in lots of different ways, towards patients, towards clients, but also to kind of our community of colleagues as well.
Now, we've got some polls, Kerry, for our audience to answer, and we'd like to use those answers. Again, no rights or wrongs here. We'd just be interested in people at home's opinions. So we'd like to know whether being professional means never showing your emotions to clients or patients. You've got choices there. It's also, is it important to have prior experience in the sector to demonstrate that you're more likely to succeed to professional registration? So if you could let us know your thoughts on those polls, just click on the option that applies. And also, what support do developing professionals require in order to provide adequate person-centered care? That's a word cloud. Remember, 1, 2, or 3 words, but you need something in each box or the results won't submit. And we'll draw on that a little bit later. So, Kerry, you wanted to get some sense of people's ideas about what it means to be professional. Why was that important to you in terms of this session?
Yeah, I think it's important to be developing towards a professional, and I don't think you kind of ever stop developing in that way. It doesn't just, it doesn't just start when you become an OU student or wherever you might study. It's something that's always ongoing. It's always something that you engage with reflectively. You're always self-evaluating. It's really important to do that. And certainly the OU on sort of certain modules that I'm involved with, particularly around health and social care, one of the things that does come up is that kind of need to be reflective, so that we're looking at those attributes of professionalism. So whether it's honesty, integrity, and what have you. And, we're very much aware that when we're talking about values and certain attributes and having the right ones, if that's the right word, that all depends on our own ideologies, our own attitudes, our preferences, how we've been socialized. But certainly within the profession, our aim is to do just that. It's kind of socialize people in a certain way, to kind of be compassionate, to kind of develop further within those characteristics, because it's great being able to get through your studies and show that you're able to kind of meet those certain criteria. But it's also important to be able to show, to demonstrate that you have these certain characteristics that kind of make up the whole of that particular profession, so that when they're going into certain employments and they can show and demonstrate to certain employers they are that kind of key professional that can provide the best care to patients, to service users, to clients, and can be the best of that profession.
We'll get the results on that poll later, Kerry. I'm just mindful of time, and I want to ask Eric some questions also. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about person-centered care before I do. Working within health, social well-being, and social care and education involves often dealing with real people with challenging and complex needs, and often they're in the process of very difficult times themselves. Physically or mentally. So why is person-centered care so important?
Yeah, I mean, person-centered care is hugely important, whether it's in health and social care or within teaching and learning. Certainly, as an academic, that's something that's always on the forefront of my mind when I'm sort of dealing with students, sort of teaching students, etc. And essentially, is it about being person-centered, is having an approach where you're not looking at somebody as a patient, as a service user, or as a student who are coming in to learn or to obtain a treatment or what have you. So it can vary across sectors. It's the fact is that you're looking beyond a student, a patient, or a service user, and you're seeing the greater whole. So you're considering what their preferences are, their needs, their kind of backgrounds. You're trying to get a sense of who they are and what challenges they are experiencing, and trying to work with them in a way that's actually acceptable, that can also meet their needs. So say, for example, we have students who have a variety of declared disabilities, a variety of needs, and as module team chairs, as people who run modules, our aim is not just to get them through the module, but to find a way that's acceptable and that can help them through that particular module in a way that they can feel able to do so. So it's about looking at the kind of bigger whole, not just looking at them as a student or a patient or a service user said, but looking at them much more deeply as a person.
But I mean, Kerry, is it really possible to do that in particular when, we've got our own biases, our own workloads, our own time commitments? Some of these things sound very ideal, and indeed they are, but how feasible is it?
Yeah, I mean, again, being professional and sort of developing professionally, you're going to come up against this time and time again. There's going to be instances, for example, you could be running a clinic, you could have somebody coming in who you don't think is able to kind of verbally say what they can say, so you turn to sort of like a carer or a family member. And it's kind of bearing those biases in mind, where we think we know what we know, but it's actually challenging that bit further. And also in an ideal world, we want to be doing things in a certain way. Again, there's instances where we can't replicate systems, we might be short-staffed, etc. But I think the key thing is to kind of, where we see something that we're uncomfortable with, is to be able to kind of have that sense that we can challenge that, even if we're kind of, say, junior colleagues and what have you, and to know who is the go-to person or to the go-to what have you, to try and kind of challenge that kind of sense of what's going on, and to kind of really look at that much deeper. And again, this is where reflexivity comes into the pictures, that we reflect on our own practice, we see what we can be doing in a certain way, and as professionals actually question ourselves, why do we work in a certain way, and why are we thinking in a certain way as well. And I think that's a continuous issue, which reflects part of our development that never ends.
No, exactly. And I mean, it's an interesting thing, Kerry, because you were sort of talking about the nature of emotions, and we asked people earlier whether being professional means never showing your emotions to clients. And people at home, if we take a look at the results from that, well, they disagreed with the statement, with 87% of them disagreeing. And so I guess it taps into what you're saying there. It's about working with, yourself, being congruent with the way that you're
Yeah,
feeling, so that you're able to really understand the lived experience of that end user, because these things are so important, aren't they? Very often, in particular, if you're vulnerable in a challenging time, it's really important that people can, relate to other people, because those are things that will be etched on your mind often forever. We
yeah.
also asked students about whether they thought it was important to have prior experience in the sector to demonstrate that you're likely to succeed. And here the results are very interesting. So 70% said no. What is your view on that, Kerry?
I'm really glad actually to see that the people don't necessarily think they have to have prior experience, because that's one of the beauties about studying with the OU. There's lots of kind of introductory modules to kind of lead you into the profession, and it's not just about being academically ready necessarily. You can have those kind of core competencies that we've talked about already. Compassion. You have some ideas. There's transferable skills from life experiences, from other work situations. So I'm glad to see that number as well. And bearing in mind, if there aren't sort of work-based modules, or people aren't involved in employment at the minute, the whole premise of some of the modules is that it's designed to kind of level people up towards that professionalism as well. So part of the learning materials that kind of over time sort of gradually build you up to be able to kind of develop that sense of professionalism. So by the time that you come to the end of the course or the end of degree, if that's the route that somebody's taking, then you're fully fledged to kind of go out there with those kind of key skills. So very well set up to do that.
Brilliant. That's wonderful, Kerry. Eric, I must come to you, and we're going to have to run over ever so slightly on this session and take a couple of minutes out of Kieran's session next, because I want to sort of translate this. We've heard from the students in terms of what they think digital professionality means to them. So we're going to just have a quick look at some of those results, and then Eric, I want to sort of translate that from the, I guess, the work-based practice into the community of practice, which is your area. So here are the results of what people said. What do you mean by developing professionality? So empathy, support, mentoring, compassion, experience are all the keywords that are coming up. But things like up-to-date training, respect, self-image, guidance, warmth, team, opportunity, regulatory, resilience, counselling, tutors, etc. So there's lots of words here. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about how employers expect people to possess some of the attributes, as well as the community of practice, or maybe focusing on the community of practice a little bit more?
Yes, I think Kerry's sort of taking us through quite a lot in terms of what is expected of a practitioner in the workplace. So I'll pick it up in terms of the community of practice, and I think she started looking at that, mentioning the NMC as an example, which is the professional side of practice. But looking at it from that, so I look at professionalism at three levels. So there's the employer level, there's the professional community level, and then there's the individual. So at the community of practice level, it can be formal or informal. So formal will usually entail codes of practice that will normally be published by the professional association that you are a member of, and as a practitioner, you'll be expected to work to those codes. So, for example, as educators, the General Teaching Council in England, the General Teaching Council of Scotland will more or less publish a code that we are expected to sort of to adhere to, and these codes look at teaching and also looks at personal and professional conduct, and these are very, very, very important, because flouting them could mean that you could be formally expelled from that professional body. But informally, as educators, we also have our own codes of practice, which more or less demonstrate how professional we are. So issues around integrity are very, very important. But we also have to have high aspirations for our students, because that's exactly why we came to these jobs for. We also have to commit to continuous learning. So that's why we're always looking for new ways to improve our practice, new ways to learn new things, so that we can actually improve the service and the support that we provide to students. We also want to act responsibly at all times. That's very, very, very important for us, because we're beholden to each other in terms of the community of practitioners as lecturers and as teachers. But last but not the least, showing mutual respect. And this is something that is very, very, very important, even for students starting the journey. Showing mutual respect for each other is one of the key attributes that would expect you to espouse at all times within the community that you work in.
You've given a wonderful summary there, Eric, of a community of
Yeah.
practice, which for many
Yeah.
students is so important, because it is in that space where we can have that integrity, trust, respect, and hope,
Yeah.
that we can really develop and articulate the way that we learn, how we learn, but also what we're learning. So it not only offers a
Exactly.
space to share and develop, skills and techniques, etc., but also a space to clarify and articulate our thinking. But I wonder if you could end by telling us about what being professional means then for the actual individual. What does it mean for your student out there now?
Student, yeah, I think that's also a very, very, for me, a very, very important aspect of being professional. It's mainly around kind of developing a positive reputation for yourself. And I think one of the things that the previous session, which is around digital professionality, fits into this perfectly. And some of the words that came out of the word cloud are very, 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 very pertinent. And so issues around empathy, issues around respect, issues around commitment to continuous learning. These are very, very important aspects of being a professional for yourself, because you will have values that you hold dear to as an individual. And one of the things you'd want to do, whether you're in practice, whether you're at home, whether you're in the workplace, you'd want to demonstrate that at all times. So it's mainly about you, the individual, having a positive reputation for yourself. So whether you're in student forum engaging with your peers, whether you're in social media engaging with the rest of the world, you'd want to make sure that whatever you're doing holds high in terms of your level of integrity as an individual. You hold yourself high in terms of the respect you're showing for others. You also have to make sure that you're holding high in terms of listening to others. These are all very, very important personal attributes that a professional is expected to sort of work through with.
Absolutely. And I think there's also something there about critiquing others' work and doing so in a respectful way, Eric, because, very often, if you care about somebody, you can help them develop their own thing. But, being kind and evidence-based in terms of how one is doing that can really help that individual or hinder them. And that community of practice is important to adhere to those values, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true, Karen. And that's one of the things that is sometimes sort of a bit confusing for students, because providing academic critique, it's a good thing. It's not disrespectful. It's the way it's done. So, because one of the key things you learn from your studies is being able to challenge, and the challenge is done in a respectful way, and that's what academic critique is all about. That's the key thing. That's a personal attribute that it's enshrined in a lot of the curriculum and that you come across as a student. But we'll also hope that post-graduation you take that attribute into employment and into your practice.
Kerry and Eric, that's been a fascinating conversation. I wish we could continue, but it's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much. And I very much hope that students can remember this when they're reading their TMA feedback, when they're thinking, oh gosh, they're thinking this critique here is valued by someone who cares about me and is nourishing me and is helping me to develop in my academic role. So thank you very much. Right, we're going to show you another of our campus tours, and then I will be back for our next session, which is about learning to learn. See you in a second.